Shirley. How are you?
Good
afternoon. We are sisters sharing our heart with you.
We're so happy that you are here today.
Oh, Shirley.
We have special guests.
I'm excited for our guests.
This is Sarah and Daniel, and they are a beautiful couple, and we have such a great message to share with you today. And I've known Sarah for quite some time. She was at the school that I taught at, and
she was my PE teacher when I was in middle school.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yes.
How awesome.
And Stephanie and Sarah are best friends.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
how wonderful.
So it's fun to go back, and it's so much fun. We don't get to see each other very often, but the times we get to see each other is very special. So,
Oh, that's
Daniel,
wonderful.
I'm getting to know Daniel more and more. So, very
All
exciting.
right. Well, I think we have a few questions for you guys, and I would like to start off. First of all, to say it's nice to meet you both,
Likewise.
and I'm glad you're here. And I just want to welcome you to our show, and let's just have fun.
Yes, I like that. Fun is
So,
fun.
tell me, Shirley kind of elaborated a little bit, but tell me how you both know Shirley.
So I first met her at the school, and her daughter Stephanie actually became my first friend at that school.
Oh, really?
And yeah,
That's special.
known her since I think it was 1999.
Wow.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it has been a few years.
Yeah, just a
Yeah.
few.
I am getting older. Yeah.
We like to think they're getting older and
Okay.
we're on standby.
Okay, I like that. That
That's
works.
good. We can take that.
We're just maturing.
Yes, yes, hopefully. In every way, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
So how did you meet Shirley?
So I met Shirley through Sarah and Sarah's friendship with Stephanie.
Okay.
So that's my connection. I was able to officiate Stephanie's wedding
Yes.
recently. So that was
Very
a nice
special.
treat.
So Stephanie is
Stephanie is Sherry's daughter.
okay.
Shirley's
Shirley's daughter.
Shirley's
Sherry's your
daughter.
other daughter.
Yep.
Yeah. So.
Oh, that is
Shirley's
wonderful.
daughter.
You
Right.
got
So.
to do the wedding.
Yeah, very special.
Oh,
They
that
did it
is very
above
spe-
the beach. I can't remember which beach, but it was a little tiny area. It was beautiful. Such a gorgeous sunset, and
How wonderful.
It was nice. It was really nice.
yeah.
That was wonderful. Okay.
All right. Well, tell us about yourselves, your background, how God brought you together as a couple.
That is a interesting story.
We'll have to keep it short because we only have an hour.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So I did my undergraduate studies at Calvary Chapel Bible College in Murrieta.
Okay.
And Sarah and I met sort of through that. Her father was helping to lead a mission trip to Cambodia that I was a part of.
Oh, wow.
And so I got involved with Byron, Sarah's dad, through that. And he introduced me to Sarah. And I like to say that he was conniving and finagling to get us to marry. And
He was.
it
Oh,
worked.
nice. Wow, and you
It
could feel
succeeded.
that right away.
It
Oh yeah, it was. He wasn't trying to hide it at all. It was
Oh,
really
funny.
obvious, but it worked. So
Yeah, you didn't shy away from it, right?
I wasn't running. We'll say it that way. Yeah. So we met after he set up a time for myself and a team that I had led on a second trip to Cambodia to come to his home and share about how the trip went. And when we were arranging and scheduling for this, he actually called up Sarah and made sure that she was available at the time that he scheduled so that she would be there to be able to meet me.
Oh.
And
Oh,
it was
wow.
a series of few months after that we were engaged, and then
Oh, how
6 months
wonderful.
later we
Yes.
were married.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
It was pretty fast.
Yeah.
It's
That
not
is
the
fast.
not the fastest I've heard about, but faster than most, I think.
So
Yeah,
what were you
so-
doing in Cambodia?
I was working with an organization called Water of Life.
Oh,
And they run
nice.
a orphanage and then 2 discipleship homes. And so they work with the Cambodian people, started out with water purification
Okay.
and going out
wonderful.
into some of the villages around Cambodia and providing these, really mobile, easy to use. You could run them off of a car battery water purification systems.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, and so they were doing that and getting involved with the churches there to help to evangelize and disciple the people of Cambodia.
That's wonderful.
That is wonderful, because you think of the wells. I've heard of all the wells being dug
Yeah.
in the countries, but not this.
Yeah, one of the
Yeah.
things.
That's interesting.
Yeah, one of the things that was an issue in Cambodia is that a lot of the water, because of the Mekong River, was being somewhat contaminated, and so even the water out of the wells was iffy. And so they set up these multi-stage water purification systems that you get the water out of the well and run it through one of these things, and it was ready and good for the people there.
Very good. Excellent.
Okay, I guess it's
Do you
my
have
turn.
something to say?
Yeah, do you have
You have
anything
your
to say?
part of it, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he covered pretty much.
Good job.
Well, yeah.
Well, did
so-
you know that was kind of going on? Like he was.
Oh,
set-
my dad?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. My dad had told me about Daniel for about 6 months
Okay.
before I met him.
Oh,
wow.
okay.
About
He
this
was-
guy named Daniel who lives 5 minutes away at the Bible college. And I'm like, sounds great, Dad. I'm not going to go introduce myself.
Yeah.
And
He has
so
blue
said-
eyes and pearly whites. And
Well, I have such a huge missions heart and a heart for orphans. And so when Daniel went on these missions trips, my dad was really throwing that out that he's going on missions trips. He's leading a missions trip. He's helping with an orphanage and stuff.
There you
like that.
go.
Sounds
really
great, Dad. Sounds great,
accentuating
Dad.
the points that you like.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it didn't feel like an arranged marriage that way.
You know, so when we met, my dad was mostly hands off at that point. He just kind of
Good
let
boy.
it happen. And
You just set it up.
yeah, when I first met Daniel and he was sharing about his trip, I saw a lot of his heart, and as he talked about the orphanage and missions and outreach and God and stuff like that, he was the first person that I met who had, at least from what I could tell, the same heart as me.
Yes.
Oh, that's
And,
wonderful.
So it
That's
was
hard to find, honestly. That's beautiful.
in our first meeting, I could kind of see what my dad was saying, that okay, maybe he is he is it. And then it was 3 months later that we were engaged.
Wow.
We didn't date or anything.
Yeah.
We just kind of
Just knew.
Yeah.
Well, when
Yeah.
God brings people together, He brings it together,
Yeah.
and it just falls into place.
yeah.
You
It's
know.
so
Yeah,
true.
and so now working on 11 years later.
Yay.
Oh, that's so
So-
awesome! Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That
That's
is
wonderful.
wonderful.
That's so beautiful.
Oh.
Is it my turn or your turn?
It is my turn.
Good.
Yes.
Our teleprompters, how do you like them?
Yeah, that's good.
It's the old-fashioned way.
I wanted to know what made your decision to go into doing foster care and adoption.
Sure.
Do you want me to start since I kind of, or you tell yours
Yeah,
first?
I'll tell my part, and then you can fill in the details.
Okay.
When I became a Christian and was looking forward to my life, it was something where I just assumed I'll get married, we'll have children, and then we'll adopt.
Okay.
And that's what it was in my mind. It was we'll get married, we'll have kids because that's just what happens.
Sure.
And then we'll adopt. But in the time that Sarah and I were engaged, we started talking about plans for the future and children. We had some pretty good premarital counseling, and so they said, here's these things that are very commonly issues within marriage that people aren't prepared for because they don't discuss them. So go and discuss them.
Right?
And
Right.
So true.
and so that helped, to at least start the topic. And I'll defer to Sarah now, where she can fill in.
So I'm going to back up a little bit. With my upbringing, my parents divorced when I was about 8 years old, and then married again.
Okay.
And we ended up having a very blended family. I had step siblings, half siblings, and at one point a foster sibling, and along with my full-blooded siblings. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
And we had a very blended family, and I viewed them all as just as much my brothers and sisters. And so someone being not biologically related didn't make a difference in my mind.
Very good.
So that was kind of the, I guess, foundation of it. And then also I had somewhat of a some rough experiences as a child, and then even into my young adult years. And God really brought me through a lot of healing. Mm-hmm. And one of the verses that has stood out to me, I think it's 1 Corinthians 1:4. It says, God comforts us so that we can comfort others.
Yes.
And
So
That's
true.
good.
2 Corinthians.
2 Corinthians 1:4. And so it became a passion of mine to help others who have gone through trauma and help them get through it. And so then I wanted to adopt. I actually wanted to run an orphanage in Asia.
Oh, wow.
And it's another long story that I won't get into, but God brought me back to the States, and as I kept preparing to go back to Asia to start this safe home for women and children who have been trafficked, and I wanted to start this orphanage, and I was getting training for it. I went to many different countries to prepare and learn, and I went to school and did all of the prep work for it. But when it came time for me to actually go back to Asia and get it started, I kept feeling this lack of peace. And so I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'm supposed to get married first. Well, shortly after that, I met Daniel. We got married, and then I'm like, okay, well, maybe soon after that we'll go back and or we'll go to Asia, and just one thing after another, it just didn't work out. And eventually it hit me that God has called us to stay here and do ministry here, and then maybe stir up passion in others to go. And so then this desire for helping others and running an orphanage, well, how can I do that in the States? Because we don't have orphanages. Instead, we have foster homes here, which is great, because then the kids who would normally be in an orphanage still get to grow up in a home environment and see what that's like. So it turned into a passion for me to adopt and foster. And so when Daniel and I were engaged, I'm kind of sharing this out of order a little bit, but when Daniel and I were engaged, I was unsure how he would react to adopting or fostering, and but when we brought up the conversation and I mentioned, well, I prefer to just adopt and not have any biological kids, partially also because the idea of being pregnant has never been appealing to me. So I said, if you're willing to just adopt, that would be awesome. And he thought about it, prayed about it, and it's like...
Yeah, I took a couple of weeks and went and searched the scriptures to see, do we have an obligation to have biological children? Is that something that we must do? And that's not what I came away from the scriptures seeing. And so it was, okay, let's seek to adopt. Let's go and do that. At that same time, I was the youth pastor of a church, and within this church, there was a family that we were very close with. They kind of were like surrogate parents to me almost. Moved up into that area right after college, and they said, "Oh, here's this young bachelor. We'll take care of him." And it was wonderful. They were great.
That was
people.
wonderful.
Mm-hmm. And so they were foster parents. And I was aware of foster care in the general sort of sense, but it wasn't something that was real, forefront of my mind or anything like that. But when we started talking with them about what our plans were going forward, they said, "Well, have you ever considered foster care?" And started telling us about what their experience with it was. And what the needs of our community, our county were. Foster care is almost always county oriented,
Yes.
or at least surrounding counties. And so they were telling us about that experience, and both of us considering it said, here is a wonderful way for us to put feet to the pure and undefiled religion that God talks about in James, to care for widows and orphans
Yes.
in their
Yes.
trial. So
So true.
let's go and see if we can't do this, and God willing, either the kids will go back with their birth family, or God willing, will adopt. And so that's what we started to pursue.
So that was kind of like a divine appointment for them. God placed
Yeah.
them in your life to share,
Oh, yeah.
because they'd already been through the experience.
Yeah.
They got us set up with an awesome foster agency, which we'll probably talk about later.
Yes.
But backing up a little bit, the foster sibling that I mentioned, she was in our home when I was a senior in high school. She was actually a friend from my high school who I knew was needing another new home. And so my mom became a foster parent specifically for her and took her in until she became 18, and then she went off to college. But she's still my sister, and because of her, she went through about 30 homes. And
Oh my
yes,
goodness.
and group homes.
Oh.
And she has some horrific stories. And through her, I learned about this great need, even here in America, that, it's not just a need, somewhere in a third world country, but even here, there's such a huge need with good families to foster
Yes.
kids. And so that was also in the back of my mind through all of this. And when we met this family who introduced us to their foster agency and stuff, it just kind of all fit together.
Yeah. It's like a puzzle.
Right.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
perfect. Wow.
Yeah.
So what has been challenging for you during this journey?
What hasn't?
Yeah, right. I thought you were going to say
Sure.
Now
that.
you could really elaborate.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So there, in the experience of foster care, you have to go through certification
Yes.
to be a certified home, and there's two ways of going about that. Often people can either go straight with county services or through some kind of foster agency, and this is just a group that the state or the county sort of subcontracts with. That's not
Okay.
exactly the right way to say it, but I think you
Do
understand
they
the point.
have control over the agency?
No.
If they're like private, do they have like?
There's certainly influence. There's statewide regulations that they have to enforce, but then for our agency, which was Koinonia
Yes.
Family Services, they had additional standards and additional training that they required above and beyond the county standards. And so there's the whole state standards that everybody has to comply with.
Okay.
But there isn't an entire state oversight or control, things like that. And so the certification process is fairly lengthy, and oftentimes people can feel like it's invasive because they're coming in and
I
checking
bet.
so many different things in your
Yes.
home and doing, they want to know background. They're doing some kind of like a psychological evaluation to make sure that the family's stable enough to be able to properly care for kids. We're not very private people. We're very open, sharing about our lives. So it didn't feel terribly invasive to us, but it can be a little bit of a trial for some.
Yeah, they, like you said, they asked about background, but the trauma I mentioned that I had gone through, like they wanted to know the details of what happened, and then also the healing that I went through to make sure that I wasn't going to then unleash on these children,
yeah.
Right.
and just making sure that we're safe and we've processed through what we need to
Right.
process through
Yes.
in order to be good parents.
Yeah. Well, it's things, like that, getting involved in personal life, but then there's the regulations which dictate your water heater has to be set at this exact temperature, and
Right, right.
this kind of item has to be locked away, and
So
you
the
have to
list
have-
is like
yeah.
this long,
Yes.
right?
And much of
Yeah.
it is just good,
Yeah.
conscientious
Common
parenting,
sense.
and then
Yes.
other things, it's like, does this really matter? You know,
Right.
so things, and obviously something happened where it was important enough to make a regulation.
Right.
But
Right.
you know,
That's probably correct,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
so there was that. We once we were certified, we started the process, and it took us probably about 3 or 4 months to get through the entire first certification process, a number of trainings and interviews, checking the home, our landlord at the time, making sure they were okay with it. He was a member of my church, so it was, we had a wonderful relationship with them also. And then we were waiting for 6 months until our first placement. So it was waiting through, and they can call you at any point, any hour of the day, and say, hey, we have this child, here's what we know. And maybe that's not a lot, maybe they know very little, and they say, are you able to take this child? And we had committed with each other and trusting God's sovereignty that if we have the ability to take a child, if we have the bed and the room to do it, then we'll just say yes.
Okay.
And whatever God decides with that, he'll work out the details. Because sometimes the call that we get is the second or third, and they're still searching for more closely related family or something like that. And so we'll just say yes, and God will sort out the details.
Yeah.
And then 9 months into our marriage, we get a call saying we have a 2-day-old
Oh my
little
goodness.
baby girl. Can you take her?
She's our honeymoon
Yeah,
baby.
she's our honeymoon baby.
We had a baby.
Yeah.
So we've been married 9 months, and she came straight from the hospital to our house.
Hospital.
Oh, amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so we got our first child straight from the hospital, like most, straight from the hospital.
Wow.
And and the social worker that came and brought Gabby to us, she said, so hey, is this your first placement? We said, yeah, it's your first placement. Oh, so do you have any experience with babies? We said, yeah, we do. We said, okay, well, have
Good luck.
fun. Good luck.
Yes.
Yeah. And it was something that it was toward the late end of the day, and we knew next to nothing about what was going on with this little girl. I had to go through the paperwork that they had with us just to find what her name was. And and so it was an interesting jump right into the experience of foster care. And so from that then comes to now what it is like for you have this child, and we'll be walking through a grocery store and someone will say, oh, what a cute baby. How old is she? And we'll say, oh, she's this old. And they'll look at Sarah and they say, oh my gosh, you look great. And so
Thank you.
yeah, so we have it's interesting to
hard at
navigate
this.
those
Oh, how
experiences. Sure. And so sometimes it's challenging to know what you do in those kind of situations.
Yeah.
Sure.
For over the years, we've had 10 different children
Okay.
in placements with us. At most, we've had 5 kids in our home.
Okay.
And so it's over the course of time. Some have gone back, to their birth parents. Some have aged out, or one has aged out. And then we have the 5 that we've adopted through foster care.
Okay.
And in our experience, at least, they all of them look as if they could have been born to us.
Oh.
And so
Isn't that
that's
amazing?
something.
Yeah.
So that's something that makes, at least it changes things a little bit. We have other friends that have gone through foster care where their children are clearly not their biological
yes.
children. And so they've had experiences where people are giving them funny looks or asking
Yeah.
them, so where did you get this child? And it's just like questions that you would never ask anyone else.
Wow.
But things like that can be challenging.
They
for
learn
people.
to, at least our friends learn to come back with some witty
Yeah.
responses.
Oh, just out of a catalog, or something like that.
Or
Yeah.
Jim stamps, right?
Yeah, on
Yeah.
page 999.
Yeah.
I want to back up a little bit with when Daniel and I decided to do this, and we decided to take in any child, any age, any race, any disability, when you're filling out the application, you're able to be very specific.
Okay.
You can specify exactly what type of child you're willing to take into your home. And like he said, we just prayed that God would work out the details and trust that if we weren't supposed to have a specific child, that
He would take care of that. Yeah.
they wouldn't come to our home.
And we had calls many times where we didn't end up having a placement come from it. There's a more closely related family member, or
Okay.
there was another foster family that they called before us, and we were just the backup.
Oh,
And so
gotcha.
things
Yeah.
like that.
And then also with that, we knew that some of these children can't be reunified with their family, which is always the first goal. If the birth parents can do what they need to do,
Yes.
and get their child back, then that's the first goal. If they can't, for whatever reason, then they become adoptable. And we talked about it and decided that we will, if any child in our home becomes adoptable, we will say yes. And so then we've ended up with adopting 5, and we became legal guardians of another. So 6
Wow.
permanent placements. And then, that's just what we decided to do. But we know many people who just judge it each case by case and pray then on if they should take the child or not.
And it's if someone has other children in the home already, they have to discern what's good and right for their own family. There's sometimes where
Right.
birth order changes can really impact the
you're
children,
right.
and so things like that, where we know we are only able to, for our whole family and for the child that would be coming into our home, just within this age range. Things like that.
And that kind of changes
Sure.
as you move forward.
Yeah.
Yes.
It does, because you don't know how everybody's going to mix at first, and
Yep.
so you really have to be really watchful.
Sure.
What
So
you're-
our current oldest in the home is 14 years old. She's actually the second child that came after Gabby. So Gabby came at 9 months into our marriage, and a month later, Liz came. And she's now 14, and she has requested that if we take in any more children, that they're younger than her, because she really likes being the oldest.
Okay.
So things like that, and
Right.
just evaluating.
Yeah.
'Cause she wasn't always the oldest. We had other foster kids that were older than her,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
they went back to their birth families.
And then Gabby's how old?
She's 9.
Gabby's 9.
Yeah, she's almost 10.
Okay.
So
Wow.
That's very exciting.
That is
So
amazing.
individually, when you foster a child, there are possible challenges.
Oh yes.
oh yes.
Yeah. So
Back to the challenges.
yeah, for over the experience of having foster children, part of the training that we received from this foster agency is that all foster care, all placements within foster care involve loss. And what they meant by that is that there is some significant
Yes.
change that has affected what would be the normal kind of continuity of family life. When a child is removed from a family for whatever the reason may be, they're losing some of the consistency of place, of people. They might not have access to family background or medical background.
Okay, yeah.
For the foster family, there's a change of schedule that usually happens. There's a change of needs. You might have to start, going over to this area to make sure the kid can stay in the same school, and
Okay.
Loss of certain
Yeah.
freedoms.
Oh yes.
because this needs to be regulated this way all throughout,
Right.
and
We can't just plan a trip to Europe. We have to get approval in order to
Right.
take our foster kids with us out of the country or
yeah.
even out of the state.
yeah, notify if you're going out of the county.
That's a
You have
lot
to
of
get
work.
approval if you're going out of the
Yes.
state. So things like that can be challenging, disruptive to the sort of normal habits or patterns of life that
Right.
you've been going through, and so there's always something with that. Like even now for us, we're almost 10 years into fostering with Gabby and Liz, who are our first, and we're just now starting to get some more information about their family and health backgrounds.
Okay.
And so it's things that we just couldn't have access to before.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that
Do
was,
they reach out to you, or do you have to keep reaching back to
it's
them?
been a mix.
Mix.
Yeah,
It's
it's been a mix.
Family by family, case by case.
Okay.
One of the things that, again, the foster agency in their training for us, one of the things that they emphasize is that if things move to adoption, we want you to commit to, it's not whether this will be a closed or an open adoption. The question really will be, how open do you want it to be? And how open is good and right and healthy for your family? And for
So explain open.
Yeah.
Explain.
Historically, in the States and in most places, most adoptions were closed. That
Right.
meant there was no contact,
Right.
no information. You couldn't even necessarily go and look up to find who the birth family was.
That was the question I was
Yeah.
going to ask you. Actually.
And
yeah.
that
Yeah.
over time, they've seen that the effects on children and
Right.
families from that have not been positive. It's been something where you lack certain information. There's crisis of identity that
Yeah.
adoptive children
Yeah.
experience, and so there's been a significant push within the foster system and within adoptions in general to try and establish some level of healthy openness and connection. And that's
Right.
something that we've done really intentionally from the start, where adoption is not a rarely spoken word within our family or within
Yeah.
our context. And we will, at a developmentally appropriate kind of stage, said, well, you weren't growing in mommy's belly. You were with somebody else, and then you came to us, and that goes into more and more detail
As
over
they
time.
Yeah.
grow older.
Yeah, as they get older.
And so we try to keep some level of contact with all of the birth families, and as of now, at least lately, finally we've been able to do that across the board with all of them. And
That's really nice.
Oh.
and so
Nice for them too, because
Yeah.
what a hard decision,
Yes.
that they had to go through.
Yeah.
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 And sometimes it's been a thing that we've been able to do from the very start in foster care and have that connection. And sometimes it's okay after the adoption we've been able to from there, or it's been we're trying to reach out, or we have to keep a little bit of a distance here, and so we're making the connection through the social workers, and eventually over time that's grown into something more. But navigating that where it hasn't always been this nice, good mutual relationship with birth
Right.
families. That can
Right.
be kind of
Yeah.
challenging or
Yeah.
straining at times, depending on circumstance. Oftentimes there's the temptation to view foster parents as they're the other people, they're the embodiment of my kids being taken away, and so that can
yeah.
create some strain. We've had a little bit of that in our experience, but not as much as others that we've talked to.
Do you have to spend a lot of time in court to get all this working, or that you work through
not
the agency?
not particularly. With we have sort of two experiences with this. Our first multiple years in foster care and adoption was through this foster care agency. We, through just life circumstance, we had adopted 3, and we allowed our certification to lapse. We weren't going to be taking any further placements. We were just dealing with the 4 that we had at the time with the one that we were legal guardians for before he aged out.
And our youngest at the time was
A handful.
a handful. There you go. So we felt like the 4
Yeah.
of them were enough.
No, yeah.
This one in himself is a handful, and so we decided to not take any more kids in,
Yeah.
at least temporarily.
Yeah.
Well, the best laid plans of mice and men, right?
Yeah.
And so then one of our daughters and her brother, we had fostered one of our daughters before she was able to reunify with
Oh.
birth mom.
Oh, wow.
And then just through, circumstance and happening, she was going to be brought back into the foster system. And so because we had had the past experience with her, we were labeled as non-relative family. And so we were able to receive a emergency placement order where we received the child even though we weren't certified, and were able to go and work on our certification
Okay.
Oh,
even
nice.
after the placement.
Okay.
And they do that because there's always the goal of having the least radical changes possible in any
Yes.
of these situations. You want as much
Yeah.
continuity as you can.
Yeah.
And so we, at that point, because we weren't certified with the agency, and this placement was like, hey, you need to have this tomorrow, we decided to just pursue our certification with the county. And so we went and we were working with county social workers instead of the agency social workers primarily.
Okay. Uh-huh.
As to the question with court, most of the time, the foster children don't need to be at court cases. And so the social workers will go and they'll be representative. After a certain age, the children can go to court if they desire. And in my, at least I believe it's something like majority of them choose not to. But some will go.
What age is that?
It's after 12.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, after 12, they start to have more of a say in what happens.
Okay.
They can
Okay.
voice their opinions. They're at an age where they can comprehend and evaluate a little
Okay.
bit more clearly, and so the courts will start to take into account what they're saying
Yes,
with
yes.
more weight.
Good.
And so often the social workers will go and they'll be representing, and there's many different social workers involved in the case from point one the beginning to the
Right.
end. So if the child wants to go to court, or if they are required to be there for certain hearings, then it's our responsibility to get them there. But we aren't necessarily allowed to be in the courtroom or
Oh, okay.
things like that. So.
As foster parents, you're allowed to be in the courtroom almost the whole time. There might be times where they have you step out,
Okay.
but you're allowed to. You don't have a say in court.
Right.
You are just an observer.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
There's certain circumstances where you can apply to be recognized as what's called a de facto parent, where you've had them in your care for a significant amount of time. You have something to offer input that's unique to the case.
Okay.
And so you can apply and be recognized that way, and then have the ability to speak into it. But you are essentially you're someone that is helping the county to provide this service. The government has seen fit to say, if there is this situation where a child needs to be removed from a home, that means the child becomes a ward of the court, is the term.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the court and the government has taken responsibility for this child. But it's
Okay.
certainly not in anyone's interest or in the government's ability to care for all these children within just a merely government framework.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
they work with foster agencies and foster families because they recognize that that's better for a child to be in a home, to be
Yeah.
within the family structure. And so we are just those that are providing this service to the government, is how they have to view it in a legal
Yeah.
standing.
Okay.
So
Well, thank you for clarification, because there's I'm sure it's changed over the years.
Oh,
how
yes.
how they have to make it more reasonable, workable for the children.
Right.
Because the children are the ones that you're
Right.
trying to make sure they're being placed correctly.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, well, the more it's been studied, and seeing the outcomes of things like government-run orphanages
Right.
and things like that where the sort of moniker that it takes or not a moniker, but the phrase that it takes a village to raise a child, that's certainly
Yes.
true in one sense. We
Yes.
need the support structure around us,
Yeah.
but villages don't make children. families do, and so
Right.
it's something where that's the structure for all of human history.
Yes.
And so that's there's a reason for that. God designed it that way.
Yes.
And as close as you can keep to that, generally,
Yes.
is the
Much
best.
more
Yeah.
successful.
Yeah.
Yes.
Another side of the challenges, as other than dealing with loss and the it feeling invasive of our home and stuff, is knowing what the kids have gone through,
Yeah.
having them come in, and
Yes.
thankfully they've been pretty open with us and talking about the things that they've gone through, and that's been really hard to know what they've gone through, and then also for the ones who have been through significant trauma, they often act out.
Yes.
And one of our kids, I'll brag on her a little bit, Liz, the second child that's 14 now, she was probably the most traumatized out of the kids that we've gotten. And she threw about 2-hour-long tantrums that would get violent almost daily for about 2 years.
Wow.
Regularly from a
And that was
5-year-old forward.
Wow.
5 to
that would be
7.
tough.
Yeah, 5 years old to 7 years old. And it
A
was
lot to work through.
it was tiring.
Yes.
And there were times where we were like, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
can we keep doing this? But with the training that they give, it talks about these kids. And I just remember one time in particular, she would often lash out at me because I'm the other mom and
Yeah.
stuff. There's one time she pulled my hair and scratched my arm up, and as foster parents, you're not allowed to physically restrain them.
Right.
And I remember to get her to go to her room till she was done, I had to threaten to call the police, and she had interaction with the police, so she knew it was a big deal.
She knew what it was.
And so I pulled out my phone. I was actually texting him, but I told her, okay, you're not listening. You're not going to your room until you're done screaming.
Right.
So I'm going to have to call the police if I can't
yeah.
manage you.
Right.
And so finally she went in there, and when she had calmed down, she came out, and I was talking with her about what happened.
Yes.
And I told her this was, it took about 2.5 years from start to finish with us adopting her.
Okay.
And this was probably about around 2 years when, so after she had been throwing lots of fits, and we had already started the adoption process. And I told her, I said, Liz, it doesn't matter how you treat me. It doesn't matter what you do, how you behave. I will still love you, and I still want to adopt you. And she just started sobbing. And it just broke my heart, and it gave me hope. Like, there are moments in these, when the kids act out because of the trauma that they went through.
Yeah.
Right.
And she was so young, she didn't know how to handle it
Right.
in a different
She-
way.
yeah.
Right.
Yes.
But, there are moments of hope throughout the
Yes.
whole time of okay, there's hope for her.
Right.
She just needs to get through,
Work
heal
through it.
and
Yeah.
process
Yeah.
and
Such a long process.
and realize that
Yeah.
we love her, and
Yeah.
she's not leaving us no matter how she behaves. And then now she is like a completely different child. She loves the Lord. She she is the most helpful. I mean, she's the oldest, but she is the most helpful. She's so gentle and compassionate and kind, and I'm just like,
Wow.
there's just a night and day
Transformation.
Yeah.
change from
Thank you,
with
Jesus.
her healing. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
But that was
Beautiful.
another
Beautiful.
that's another big
That's definitely
challenge
a
of
challenge.
fostering
Yes.
is that these kids that come into your home have experienced some form of loss or trauma, and so
Yes.
then they'll
Wow.
show it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's just being persevering through the whole
Yes.
thing
Right.
and to the end, and then
Yeah.
you see the fruits of your
Being
patience
consistent and
being
loving
consistent,
anyway.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, she could see that you were consistent, that you loved her unconditionally,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
that no matter, we want to keep you.
Right.
And that just reassured her little spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And finally,
Yes.
it's like it sunk in. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what a beautiful story.
Well, and that's
Yeah.
it's something that regardless of circumstance, a lot of kids will end up doing this. They'll kind of test the limits.
Sure.
To see, is
Oh, yeah, see how far
does,
they can-
Yeah, does what they
Right.
say
Right.
actually mean something? Because if
Right.
they tell me, here's the line, and I cross it, but then nothing happens,
Yeah.
then this.
Yeah.
Or they tell me, here, I'm gonna do this for you, and will they keep their promise? And so it was something where it's a pretty common experience in foster care or adoption through foster care, where a child will say, okay, if I do this, will they still say they want me? And,
Right.
and it's this, I'm testing their commitment.
Right.
I'm testing their love.
Yes.
And that's, that can be pretty challenging.
Challenging.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
Oh, good job,
But
guys.
You did an
It's
excellent
been-
job.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been such a beautiful the results that we've seen now that we've
Yeah.
adopted, and it's
Yes.
been
Yes.
years now that each child has been in our home, and just seeing how God has worked in their hearts and seeing changes in their attitudes and behavior, and then now we've started to we're in contact with each birth mom at least
Okay.
now, and setting up meetings at the park or something. But when you adopt, it's completely up to us now
Okay.
on how much contact and when.
Wow.
And that's been so neat to see, where we'll go and have an hour meeting at the park. For Liz and Gabby, their first time seeing their mom after 9 years was a month or two ago.
Oh,
And-
wow.
Wow.
Joining them in processing through this this piece, and then going back home with them and helping them process through, and
Yeah.
talking them through, what does this mean, and what other questions do you have, and stuff like that.
Right.
We're seeing a lot of the beauty of it now, even though
Yes.
there were challenges before.
Yeah. I'll add just a final thing. I know there's other questions we need to get to. One of the challenging things about foster care and adoption through it is that everything's kind of up in the air until a court decision is made. And
Right.
often that court decision might be scheduled, but then pushed off because
Yes.
some circumstance
Some
pushed off,
Right.
something
Yep,
like that.
yep, yep.
And so there's always this up in the air. We don't know whether we're going to be able to adopt them.
Yes.
And even after they say, okay, well, they're able to be adopted, we don't know when that might happen. So we've had one where
Yeah.
Wow.
it was really about a year, and then another that was 2.5 years
Oh.
through the
Oh,
process.
wow.
Things like that.
That wears on.
Yeah,
Wow.
it certainly does. And it can be you're going through the process and you're hoping to adopt, and it looks like it might go that way, and then you'll get a call saying, hey, court decided to reunify, and so we're going to be coming tomorrow. And so things like that. And that's certainly a challenge. When we were going through the process of being certified and doing our yearly kind of recertification trainings, there would be families that were just getting started. We were that family at the beginning, and everyone, or at least each class, someone would say, how do you keep yourself from getting attached to these children, knowing that they might go, back home to their birth families? And each time, whoever was running the training had just the perfect response to it. And I remember the man who did the first time answering that question. He said, we get that question every training.
Oh, I bet.
We understand where it's coming from. You're putting your heart out there, and it can just be
Yes.
so hard to see these kids go back to a situation that maybe you wouldn't have chose to put them
Yes.
back into.
Right.
But honestly, if you're not going to get attached, we don't want you to do this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so it was
There has to be an
right.
attachment.
He said
Yes.
we want you to
Yes.
be invested, put your heart into it.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then for us as Christians, it was we just trust that God will work
He will
out
do
the
it.
details.
Yes.
He knows what is best. His will is perfect, and so it may be that we experience some heartbreak, and that is even within His will and His plan for some good purpose. And so we've had that, but that's sort of, it's never final till it's final.
Right.
That's and
Wow.
that's certainly a challenge. But knowing that maybe our purpose here is to give this child an experience of a safe
Yes.
home for just this amount of time. And then they go. There's some, two girls in particular that we have more regular contact with, even though they went back to their birth families. And
So you get to see them, even though they go back?
Yeah, a little bit.
As long as they're
nice.
willing to keep in touch
Sure.
with you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's
that's
not always
beautiful.
it's not always that way. There's some that we don't have contact with
Yeah.
anymore, but
I didn't know you had an option like that.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it has to be both
Yeah.
sides need
Right.
want to.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so we make ourselves available for that with them and try and keep up. And that's been good for
Awesome.
us. But it's that's probably what I would say is one of the significant, obvious sort of challenges to
Right.
it, that it's just up in the air.
Yeah.
You never really know what's going to happen.
Yeah. All right.
Well, I ran a daycare preschool,
Mm-hmm.
and I had my own children, and I can kind of relate to you. You get attached.
Oh yeah.
You care for them all day long. They're with you, and sometimes they call you mom.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and so it's like you have to have your heart out there.
Yes.
Sure.
Whether you are gonna keep them or not,
Yeah.
you don't know. But like you said, you're gonna impact their lives,
Right.
and it's gonna be a positive thing. So, can you share some of the best parts of how this all has turned out?
Well, Liz was a great example. There's also one of the girls Daniel mentioned that we're still in touch with, and she has given her life to the Lord, but she's still kind of struggling. She's an adult now on her own,
Yeah.
but we're still able to be a part of her life, and
Yes.
she comes to us for advice
Okay.
or sometimes when she needs help or something. But I have met up with her when I've had opportunity and stuff like that, and just still being able to be involved. Building a great relationship with the birth parents
Yes.
also. I view it as sort of a ministry to them as well.
Sure.
To
They're
to
dealing
share
with
God's
a lot of pain too. So
yeah, they know
Yeah.
we're Christians and that we love the Lord, and so we're hoping that our love for them as well is a big influence
Sure,
to them,
yeah.
and
That's awesome.
Yeah.
and just seeing the kids grow, and
Yeah.
people wouldn't be able to tell that they're
Parenting is a blessing and a joy in and of itself. It's difficult,
Sure.
for raising any children.
Right.
It's difficult, but it's something where you can see good coming out of it.
Yes.
And along with that, one of the things that's been especially encouraging to me is helping others to kind of understand foster care a little bit better, where someone will come and they say, oh, is this, your child? And I'll say, yeah, it's my child. And they say, oh, great. Well, how old are they? And they go through, and it'll come out where they suddenly start to calculate, how long have they been married? How old is this child? And it's they're figuring out. I said, oh, don't worry, we're their foster parents, or we're adopted.
Yeah, how funny.
And they'll start to calculate. Oh, okay, all right. Well, what's going on with their real parents? And at that point, like it's just because people don't have any other language to talk
Yes.
about this yet.
Right.
And I said, well, we're their real parents. Their birth family is,
Yeah, right,
this.
exactly.
And then suddenly they go,
Switch it around.
oh, yes. And they
Yes.
realize, oh, right, that's such a much better way to describe this.
There you go.
Because it's like, well, we're not the fake parents. We're the adopted. And so it's those kind of things where suddenly
Yeah.
someone comes around and they have the terminology
Yes.
to talk about
Correct.
this.
Right,
Because they don't
right.
have contact with it
Right.
otherwise.
Exactly.
And so things like that here's our experience, here's how you might go about it. And so there's been some families that we've been able to influence, and now they're getting involved in foster care themselves.
Yes.
And
Oh,
it's
it's beautiful.
something where it's just this mysterious kind of taboo subject
Yeah.
for some people. And then you move past that and
Yes.
say,
Right.
hey, it's not
It's all
anything
good.
to be ashamed about. There's
Right.
nothing
Right.
going on
Right.
with
It's
this. And,
beautiful.
and they see it. Okay, here's
Yes.
a good that I can be involved in.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's why it was
And,
so important for me to have you have us all together so
Yeah.
you could share. I think it's so necessary because you're right. People don't know.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's something where, for whatever reason, there's not a lot of push to try and get people involved
Right,
in facilities.
right.
There's so much need, here, so they're not going to put the funds
Right.
that they have for foster care into marketing, because there's
Right,
so much
right.
else that needs to be
Yeah,
done
right,
with it.
right.
And so it's being some example, or being those that can kind of say, hey, we're advocates for
There
this.
you go.
That's been a
Yeah,
good thing.
well, we are going to share the organization that you were, the agency you were with, and a few of your pictures, and
Sure.
we want to just offer you a chance to find out more information, and we're so glad that you joined us today. Do you have one closing comment? We have about 2 minutes left. If you would like.
If you have a home that has a space, you might not think that you have space, but you might actually have space. If you have a home that's safe, where you could love on kids, at least look into it.
Yes.
It is totally worth it. There are challenges to anything that turns out beautiful.
Yes.
So, just, it doesn't hurt to at least check it out and look
That's
into it.
right. That's
Yes.
right.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
We're
I think
so
that says
happy
it
you
well.
joined us
Yeah.
today.
Thank you. It was
Thank
great
you.
having you.
Thank you
Yeah.
for joining us today.
Yes.
We just pray God's blessings over you.
Yes.
And we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Take care. God bless.